Shri Matis Blankers. Of High Charana of the Bhagavatam Social Ballpark. ISKCON Divi Foundation. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Nama Chagra Shri Thakur. Friends of the whole Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda. Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sari Gaur Bhakti Shri Sri Radha Krishna Govardhana Shamakund Radha Kund Sri Govardhana Raj Bhumi Shri Udavadana Ki Navdat Mahaprabhu Dhamma Ki Jainitai Ho Premanandi. All glories to somebody, all glories to somebody, all glories to somebody, all glories to somebody, let us be the Shri Guru and Shri Guru. All glories to Shri Prabhupada. Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo No Aneka Madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Yo non neka madandanam. Yo non neka madandanam. Vibrangsam Chaksuradishat. Vibrangsam Chaksuradishat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo no neka madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Vibrangsam Chaksuradishat. Vibrangsam Chaksuradishat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo non neka madandanam. Yo non neka madandanam. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Vibrangsam Chakshu Adishat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo no neka madandanam. Yo no neka madandanam. Vibrangsam Chakshurādichat. Vibrangsam Chakshurādichat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo no aneka madandhana. Yo no aneka madandhana. Vibramsham Chakshurādichat. Vibramsham Chakshurādichat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Paroksha Paramo Guru. Yo no neka madandhana. Yo no neka madandhana. Vibrangsam Chakshurādichat. Vibrangsam Chakshurādichat. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na. Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na.
Paramo Guru, Yono Nika Madandanam, Vibram Shakuradishat, Tvam Nunam Asuranam Na, Paruksha Paramo Guru, Yeno Nika Madandanam, Vibram San Chakshura Adishat,
Tvam, your lordship, Nunam, indeed, Asuranam, of the demons, Na, as we are, Paroksha, indirect, Parama, the supreme, Guru, spiritual master, Ya, your lordship, Na, of us, Aneka, many, Mada Antanam, blinded by material opulences. It's kind of interesting. Mada Andanam means, like under means, not seeing, but Mada means mad. And so they're mad. They're not seeing it, they're actually mad by the material opulences. Vibransham, destroying our false prestige. Chakshu, the eye of knowledge. Adishat, this is an important point. This Vibransham, Chakshu, Adishat. By the eye of knowledge, you destroy our false identity, our false prestige. It's only by knowledge you can actually understand who you really are, what's happening in the material world, what's happening to us because of our attachment to material nature. So Prabhupada's purport. Since your lordship is translation. Since your lordship is indirectly the greatest well-wisher of us demons, you act for our best welfare by posing as if our enemy. Because demons like us always aspire for position of false prestige, by chastising us, you gave us the eyes by which to see the right path. Responsibly, please. Since your lordship is indirectly the greatest well-wisher of us demons, you act for our best welfare by posing as if our enemy. Because demons like us always aspire for a position of false prestige. By chastising us, you give us the eyes by which to see the right path. So this is the situation for, practically speaking, everyone in this material world, is they're bewildered or enamored by this position of false prestige. And it's false. It doesn't matter what position you have in the material world. Ultimately, it's false because it's temporary. You can be, the president of the biggest, most powerful country in the world. You can be, like the head of a big corporation. You can be whatever. But they're all temporary positions because, as was being explained in the previous verse of purport, because the body's temporary, everything associated with the body is also temporary. So it's all, ultimately it's false because it's temporary. It may last for a short period of time, but what's the point of becoming attached to it? Because it's only a temporary position. And especially for us doing devotional service, if we have some position within the society and we see it as a position, this can be bewildering for us. But rather better we see it as a service. That, whatever it is we do, we're doing it as a service. Even we see, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, whenever he would address his disciples, what would he say?
Dasosmi.
Huh?
Dasosmi.
Was it Tamara Nitya Das? Yeah? Amitamara Nityadas, that I'm your eternal servant. That he saw himself as the servant. And that's what we need to see ourselves as, is the servant. And this is why Bali Maharaj is successful, because he sees himself in this position. He sees himself as the servant of Krishna. And so he's successful. But if we think ourselves anything else, then we become bewildered. If we think ourselves the controller, the enjoyer in this material world, we become bewildered by the material world, by the material nature. And material nature is very, very powerful. But it's kind of interesting. It's like, I remember years ago, I was in Canada going through to the US, and the devotees who were driving me, they took me via the Niagara Falls. And quite impressive. I mean, just there's such an amount of water is going over those falls every second. And I remember we went on the boat. They have this boat called the Maid of the Mist, and it goes right up to the base of the falls, like, basically, from here to probably Prabhu, we're this far away from where the water's going crashing down. And you just look at it and you think, my gosh, if the boat went in front and got hit by that water, it'd just be completely smashed. Completely destroyed. It's so powerful. Yet there's these little birds, they're about this big, they're diving right at the base of the falls and catching fish. Yeah? So they're taking shelter of that environment, just like you see like crabs on rocks, the waves are crashing on the cliffs. Now if we were to go down there, on the rocks, the waves are crashing, the big waves, if we were to go down there and climb on the rocks, and a wave came and smashed on the rocks, what would happen to us? We'd be smashed, we'd be just, we'd probably be killed. But these little crabs, not very big, they're just clambering, scrambling around on the rocks, and they're there, the waves are crashing, they're still, because they're taking shelter, for them that's a safe environment. But we cannot do the same, because we can't take shelter of that. So, in this material world, if we're able to take shelter of what is a natural position for us, and that natural position means Jiva Swarupa Krishnena Nityadas, Krishnena Tasta Shakti, Veda Veda Prakash. Because we're Krishna's Tasta Shakti, we can take shelter of the material nature, we can take shelter of the spiritual nature. We can go either way. If we take shelter of the material nature, we become completely bewildered in this material world. If we take shelter of Krishna's spiritual nature, then we become liberated from the material world. We can take it either way. So with Maya, she's extremely powerful. If we try to exploit Maya, she actually conquers us. But if we take shelter of Krishna, Maya becomes our servant. You see, it's a simple thing. It's just like, the same with these little living entities. When they take shelter of the greater force, they're protected, and they're actually in a safe environment. But for us, because that's not our natural state to be in these diving around the water at the base of the waterfall, it would destroy us, because it's not our natural environment. Our natural environment is to serve Krishna. This is who we are. Krishna and Nityadas is our nature. So therefore, when we take shelter of Krishna, this is when the living entity flourishes, because we're in our natural environment. Richly much better. Bali Maharaj considered the Supreme Personality of Godhead a better friend to the demons than to the demigods. Why? Why? Why is he a better friend to the demons than to the demigods? What does he do to the demons?
Because he takes their prestige.
Huh?
Because he takes their prestige.
He takes their prestige, he takes away their material opulences. Yeah? What does he do to the devatas?
He gives them.
He gives them material positions. So they become enamored by the material position. They're thinking, I'm Indra, I'm very important. I'm the king of the devatas. And we see, regularly he becomes puffed up. Regularly he thinks that he's, the boss. But actually, his position is that of a servant. And so we see Bali Maharaj. This is because Bali Maharaj is a great devotee. He's actually understanding that Krishna's position is, this verse, bhakwatam gavitam samsava lok maheshram surinam sarvabhutanam the Atma Namsham. He's understanding that ultimately Krishna is the supreme well-wishing friend of all living entities, not just the devotees, but all living entities. And what's that verse in, I think it's the 9th chapter, is it? Samaham sarvabhuteshu name dveshis priya priya. That's the last one, no? Let envy no one, nor impartial anyone, but whoever renders service to me in devotion, he's a friend, he's in me, and I am in him. And so Krishna is ultimately, he's equal to all, but still he favors the devotees, which is a natural situation. In the material world, the more one gets material possessions, the more one becomes blind to spiritual life. The demigods are devotees of the Lord for the sake of material possessions, but although the demons apparently do not have the Supreme Personality of Godhead on their side, he always acts as their well-wisher by depriving them of their positions of false prestige. By false prestige, one is misguided, so the Supreme Lord takes away the position of false prestige as a special favor. So this is the nature of Krishna. He's always favoring every living entity. He's creating the situation in this material world. Like what's the whole point of the material world? Why is the material world here?
To give us that experience so that we can go back.
To correct this independent mentality. We see that the living entities are constantly being beaten down by the modes of material nature. And the idea is to correct this miscreant mentality, so we can give up this idea of being the independent controller and enjoyer, and understand that our actual position is to serve Krishna. It's a very interesting situation. Now, one point that's being made here, which I thought was quite interesting, is this. In the material world, the more one gets material possessions, the more one becomes blind to spiritual life. So we see, like in our spiritual progress, our spiritual life, there are 4 basic principles: austerity, cleanliness, mercy, and what's the one that Bali Maharaj is demonstrating?
Truthfulness.
Truthfulness. Yeah, very, very important. And these 4 principles of spiritual life are directly related to the 4 principles or the 4 pillars of sinful life. What are they? Meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling. If one has if one kills animals, it means they're devoid of mercy, compassion. It's so heartless to kill an animal, especially a defenseless living entity. If one engages in gambling, what does that mean? They're devoid of truthfulness. They're directly connected. And then meeting, intoxication. Austerity. No austerity. And also sometimes connected to cleanliness as well. And of course, illicit sex is directly connected to cleanliness. And so Prabhupada would regularly make this point that we need to cultivate these religious principles of austerity, mercy or compassion, truthfulness and cleanliness. And so you see that Prabhupada was very keen that the temples should be spotlessly clean. He would often say the temple should be shining like a new pin. Sometimes he'd say, clean as glass. Because like when if there's a fingerprint on the glass, it's so obvious, it's easy to see. So everything in our temples, everything, everything. The rooms, the cupboards, the katals, the dungas, the wall, everything. Bathroom, toilets, everything should be spotlessly clean. Because this will help us to cultivate purity. This will help us to overcome these lower qualities, these lower kind of qualities here that I mentioned about meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, gambling. Even though we may externally give them up, and as was described yesterday in the purport, we see how the devotee may maintain some kind of remnants of these bad qualities. But through cultivating these religious principles, it helps us to purge all these things from our heart. So this is why in the practice of bhakti, all these elements are so important. We should not minimize any of these things. The compassion, austerity. We all need to perform austerities. But austerities means different things for different people. Like some people, austerities can mean like, taking cold bath in the middle of winter. Prabhupada sometimes, there's actually an interesting story. Prabhupada was in Vrindavan and Shama Sundar was there, and Shama Sundar was chanting his Gayatri. And he saw that Prabhupada, he was sitting down somewhere, I can't remember where, and he saw that Prabhupada was going out for his morning walk, so he just got up and he ran out to follow Prabhupada without his shoes. And Prabhupada, when he got there, he turned to Shama Sundar. Prabhupada turned to Shama Sundar. He said, "Oh, where are your shoes?" And he said, "Srila Prabhupada, when I'm with you, I got all this sort of like esoteric kind of stuff. I don't need any shoes. I just feel like And Prabhupada, he said, there are already enough austerities in the material world without inventing any. And this is the fact of it, that just being in this material world, especially for a devotee, can be so austere, because people are habituated to all these sinful acts. Just like, last night we were out on Harinam, and you can see the way people are acting. They're so habituated, they're so addicted to sinful acts. Therefore, we go out on Harinam to try to help purify their heart, so that they can actually, at some point in their existence, come to the practice of devotional service. And ultimately everyone will, because it's Lord Chaitanya's mission. Lord Chaitanya's mission is to liberate all the conditioned living entities that are suffering in this material world, and every one of them suffering. So this mission, because it's his mission, that ultimately it will happen. It may take many, many generations, it may take many, many lifetimes, but ultimately it will happen because it's Lord Chaitanya's mission. And this is spoken by Thakur Haridas in the Antya-lila, because Lord Chaitanya was expressing his concern that all these living entities were suffering in the material world, and how they become liberated. And Thakur Haridas said, "My Lord, they're already liberated because it's your desire that they'll be liberated." And this is the potency of the desire of the Lord, is when Krishna is determined that something will happen, it happens. Because nothing can go against the will of the Lord, because he's so powerful. So, and we see here also, we're talking about the different religious principles. One of the reasons that Bali Maharaj is glorified, he's so truthful that when Vamana Deva approached him as a dwarf Brahmana, and he asked him for charity, and Bali Maharaj says, "Yes, I'll give you whatever you like." And he asked him for 3 steps of land, and he poured the water to seal the vow, and done. And then Vamana Deva, he took his first step and he expanded his form, and then he took his second step, and then he covered the whole. In 2 steps, he covered the whole material universe. And Bali Maharaj promised him 3 steps. He said, "Okay, you put your 3rd step on my head." He'd rather give up everything. He'd rather give up every situation he had in the material world, his opulence, his power, his prestige, rather than give up truthfulness. He'd rather die than give up the principle of truthfulness. And we see Yudhisthira Maharaj was the same. And Yudhisthira Maharaj is glorified for that, for his maintaining religious principles. And as devotees also, we need to become, very, very, not just habituated, but very strict in our maintenance of these religious principles. Because these are, they're essential. They're an essential element in human life, just like we talk about, this austerity, truthfulness, cleanliness, and compassion. These are very, very important aspects in our spiritual life. And also, by cultivating these qualities, we can also have influence on others. Because when it's kind of interesting, because if you look at Kali Yuga, the way things are developing in Kali Yuga, people are becoming more and more addicted to meat eating, illicit sex. I mean, the whole society is just running on illicit sex. And just the way you see, like last night, we're looking at seeing the way people are dressed and the way they're interacting with each other. You know, even like some of those guys when they're coming and dancing in front of the Harinam, just the way they were dancing, it was very provocative, you know. Or they're trying to be provocative. They're trying to attract. You know, like there's one guy there who's just trying to show off that he was with, I think there were 3 or 4 girls there, and he's trying to show off to the girls to, you know, attract them. So we see how the whole society is attracted to these things, and also what they're doing is like, if you look at a religious culture, there's many rules and regulations that you follow in that religious culture as a part of, you know, learning to control the mind and senses, as a part of you know, cultivating our spiritual understanding. We control, because the human life is meant for as was it Nayam Deho Deha Bhajam Viloka Kastam Karman Ahate Bhujam Tapo Divyam Putra Kiyena Shakam Shuddha Yashman Parama Sokyam Tam. Rishabdev explains to his sons that the human life is not, was it Vidbhujam Ye, it means like village animals. We're not meant to live like village animals, hogs and dogs that eat stool. We're actually meant to cultivate this Tapo Divyam. We're meant to practice austerity, and the purpose of the austerity is to achieve the divine. We practice austerity so we can understand God. And as I mentioned, this austerity can be different things for different people. You know, even studying the scriptures is considered to be an austerity of the mind. To speak only of Krishna is an austerity of speech. But actually for the devotee, these aren't austerities. You know, to be able to speak of Krishna all day long is relishable. To be studying the scriptures is relishable. So these things that materialists might consider austerities, a devotee considers these, you know, what's that verse on? Tushanti Rachara Manticha, they derive great satisfaction and bliss by always conversing about me and enlightening one another. This is how they find their bliss, their satisfaction. So the devotee engages in discussing the Lord, and they find great satisfaction. But by practicing austerity, one is able to control the mind, control the senses. And so by always, and also especially when you engage in spiritual activities, then they tend to push out these material inclinations, and one becomes cleansed from all these material contaminations, such as, you know, the tendency for meat eating, gambling, illicit sex, intoxication. As he's explained that in the Gita, how in this material world that everything naturally sort of goes to its lowest sort of position. Just like we see with water. If you pour water, you know, say for instance we poured a cup of water up on top of this shelf here, what would happen to it? Would it stay there? It would come down to the floor. And then like if it came here, it would go down there because it's lower there. It would just always naturally find the lowest place. So it's like that in the material world, is the living entities naturally tend to go to the lowest position. So that they're naturally drawn to meat eating, illicit sex, intoxication, and gambling because it's the lowest position. Therefore we practice, you know, restraint. Human life is meant for sense control. Human life is meant to restrain ourselves from these, it's just like in married life, you know, the idea is married life gives us the opportunity to engage in, if one desires, to engage in sex life. But it's under restraint. It's not just you go have sex anytime you like. No, there's rules and regulations involved. And every aspect of human life is governed by rules and regulations. But what we see in the modern era is that people want to kick out all these rules and regulations, just be free to do whatever they like. No restrictions, no rules. And like, you know, even I look, you know, in my short life, I look back what it was like when I was a child and what's going on now. Like the type of stuff that was on, say for instance, I mean, I don't watch television, but you hear about what's on television. The stuff that's on television movies these days, if like when I was growing up as a child, if someone even said a bad word, like a swear word, they were banned from television. Now it's just like free. They say whatever they like, do whatever they want on television. You know, as long as it's after a certain time, you know, in the evening when children are supposed to be sleeping, they do whatever they like. You know, so we see how people are really pushing back against religious life. because they don't want to be regulated. They want to become unregulated. And what happens? They become, because animals are unregulated, they become animals. The whole society, you'll see, is becoming more and more animalistic. The Prabhupada would say it's just a polished cat and dog society. And that's what we see is happening in this material world. It's becoming more and more like an animal society. They have sex anywhere. They fight. Just like when we were in Rome recently, and there's just these people just abusing each other, just right there in the street, just carrying on like you see dogs, rah, 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 and they're barking at each other, and so they're just like dogs. And they think this is a civilized society. They think this is a cultured society. But it's just, like Prabhupada says, it's a polished cat and dog society. That's what we're dealing with in this world. And so this Sankirtan mission of Lord Chaitanya is so important in this world. It's so vital to this world, because if we don't do anything, then they're just going to glide down to hellish life. And so Lord Chaitanya, he's come here to liberate, liberate all these fallen conditioned living entities. And it's our responsibility, it's our duty as civilized human beings, it's our duty to give them that which is the only thing that can save them. And that's this Harinam Sankirtan. And it comes in the form of chanting the holy name, comes in the form of book distribution, comes in the form of prasad distribution. So many forms it takes, but it's our duty is to give that to them in whatever way we can. And especially a big city like Paris, you see there's so many people living such degraded lives. And the only hope they have, the government can't do anything about it. You look at the government, they bring in all these different rules and it just makes things worse. Because people push back against the rules, they have no capacity to administer it. They have no capacity to regulate the society because these cities are so big. Just like when we were walking around in central Paris last night, I noticed all the footpaths are broken and there's puddles, and if you stand on the rock because the pavement it moves like that, and then water squirts up and goes all over your clothes and stuff like that. But because I've seen this in many big cities. The cities are so big that it's very, very difficult for the city management to keep things in good condition. And that's what they can't. They just don't have the capacity to manage things in this world. And we'll see that people will become more and more unregulated if we don't push the Sankirtan mission. And the lives will become more and more hellish. So very, very important to push on in Krishna consciousness. And here it mentions how Bali Maharaj is mentioning how the Devatas, or actually when people get material facility, they become blind to the spiritual path. And this is definitely the case for the materialists. The more material facility they have, the more blinded they become to the spiritual path. Because when they have a lot of facility, then they think that this is happiness. They think this is the goal of life. There used to be a song, name, fame, glory, it's the same story. You get your name up in lights, you think it's the perfection of life. It's like you go to, like in London, they have the theatre district, just down from where the temple is. And you'll see out the front of the theatre, they have these big signs up there, such and such a play with such and such a person. The person goes out there, oh, my name's up there, very, very proud. They think they're very, very important people because they've got their name up in lights. But how long does it last? How long does the play run for? Maybe a few weeks, a few months, maybe a year or two. And then, who was that person? Never heard of them. And it's just like, they cling on to this fame for so many years. Just like when we were in where were we? Yesterday, somewhere. Oh, that's right. I went to or Sham up here, the supermarket. I had to take a bag back. It was the wrong size. And they, just behind the service counter, they have like these screens, you know, because I think they probably sell tickets for all these things. And I saw they had AC/DC. I thought, these guys are dinosaurs. They've been around for like 60 years, you know, and they're still trying to, you know, squeeze some enjoyment out of this aging body, you know. And it's like, you know, and I was just thinking how there's them and there's the Rolling Stones are still going. I remember listening to the Rolling Stones in the early 60s. Yeah, and now it's like, you know, 2024, 60 years later, they're still trying to squeeze something out of it. I mean, you know, Mick Jagger's practically got a walking frame, you know, it's like he's such an old guy. And still they're trying to, and this is the nature, because they're getting some gratification out of it, some temporary illusory gratification, and they're thinking that this is, wow, you know, this is perfection. You know, they go and they see, my name is up there, you know, I'm a famous person. But how long does it last? You know, in 200 years' time, Mick Jagger will just be a name in the history books. But we see, you know, Bali Maharaj, he's eternally going to be glorified because he's one of the Maharajas, because he surrendered to Krishna. You know, when someone, Lord Chaitanya mentions that the devotee of the Lord, he is famous, he's actually famous, this is eternal fame. They'll always be glorified in the pages of the scriptures. And the scriptures are eternal. Even though we see something like with the Chaitanya Charitamrita, you know, Bhakti Yoga Thakur was looking for that everywhere. So sometimes the scriptures become you know, hidden and they're not available, but then at various times they become available again. Just like Krishna says, you know, he says, you know, I spoke, you know, in the past I spoke this science to the sun god, and now I'm speaking to you. So we see, you know, millennia after millennia, these scriptures they come out again, and so they're constantly coming out, you know, in this way. But, you know, like we're talking about material possessions here, and how like the materialist becomes blinded by possessions and wealth and fame. But for a devotee, it's not like that. For a devotee, it doesn't become, or a devotee shouldn't become, but a great devotee never becomes worldly. Why? Because he uses these facilities simply to serve Krishna. You look at Pundarik Vidyanidhi, for instance. You know, Radha thought he was a great materialist because he had so much wealth. I mean, he was extraordinarily wealthy. But then, who was it? Radha was with, I can't remember. And he said, no, he's not like that. You know, come with me and I'll show you. And so Radha went with this devotee to visit Pundarik Vidyanidhi, and the devotee suggested to Radha to recite some verses, particular verses from the bhagavatam. I don't remember which verses they were. And he recited these verses, and Pundarik Vidyanidhi went into ecstasy. And he was thrashing around on the floor, and he was smashing all these valuable possessions. He had no concern for them whatsoever. So this is the position of the devotee, is because, why? They understand that ultimately everything belongs to Krishna, that everything is there for Krishna's pleasure. Because Krishna explains that I'm the source of everything. All the material and spiritual worlds, they emanate from me. So if we understand, just like we may have so much facility, we've got a computer, we've got a phone, we've got this, we've got a car, house, wife, husband, whatever. If we understand that ultimately all these things are the property of Krishna, then it will never be bewildering for us. Bali is making this comparison here between the devatas and the daityas. And the devatas, they get great wealth, but unfortunately sometimes they think it's there for their enjoyment. Just like we see, you know, like with Indra, you know, there's many different stories about how he's got himself into difficult situations. You know, for instance, when Prithu Maharaj was performing his Ashwamedha yogas, and Indra became concerned, oh, you know, his position will become greater than my position. So then he stole the horse from the sacrifice, and you know, and he performed many actually sinful acts. At one point, he dressed himself up as a sannyasi, so he could steal it. You know, so they'd give charity to him, steal the horse, and he wouldn't get attacked. And Prabhupada describes in the purports there how this is the beginning of the corruption of the sannyas ashram. And we see here now in Kali Yuga, it's very interesting. Prabhupada describes it in Vrindavan. There's a class of women, because they understand if they have a child by a great devotee, that the child will be a great devotee, then that child will be able to deliver them back to the spiritual world. So they have like an intention they want to go back to the spiritual world, but their mentality is a bit twisted, and they think by doing this. But it's interesting because they have this mentality: oh, I'll go to Vrindavan and I'll find a sadhu and I'll cause him to fall down and have a child by him. But there's a group of men that understand this, so they go to Vrindavan and dress themselves up as sadhus to find these women to have sex with. So this was all begun by Indra, this mentality of dressing up as a sannyasi. So the point is, I try to make there is that whatever facility we have, whatever opulence we have, if we understand that ultimately this comes from Krishna, that ultimately this belongs to Krishna, then this will bring about our liberation, our emancipation. But if we try to enjoy these things for our own pleasure, then this will bring about our bondage in the material world. There's an interesting verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I don't remember the verse, I just remember 2 words out of it. There's, what is it, Kamendriya Priti, Bhagavancha Kare?
Kamendriya Priti Vancha.
Huh? And then Krishnendra Priti.
Kamendriya Priti Vancha.
Anyway, it doesn't really matter. The essence of the verse is that Krishna's Kaviraj is explaining is when we have desire to enjoy the senses, this kamendriya priti. This is called kam, lust. But when we take the same desires in Krishnendriya priti, then we use it for Krishna's satisfaction. This is love. It's a simple thing, the same thing. Exactly the same thing. Like, I've got these glasses, right? If I'm using these glasses to enjoy my senses, like I want to look at some illicit materials and think, oh, I'll get really great satisfaction. This is lust. But if I take these same glasses and I look at Radha Parisisvara, this then can become an element of love. Same thing. Prabhupada would often say that Krishna consciousness means taking the I out of the center of everything and putting Krishna in the center of everything. That's all it is. We're not actually changing our activities, we're changing the motive, why we're doing it. And so if we're doing the same things, just like we see this morning with this kirtan, such an enthusiastic kirtan, a bit too loud for me, but very enthusiastic. But we're doing that for Krishna. And I was thinking about this because my understanding is sometimes in Paris, the police, they like to stop the Harinam. I think it's probably not legal. But it's kind of interesting because, we could be on the streets singing, right? And they don't like that. But if we go to a nightclub and we sing, that's fine. So we can sing for our sense gratification. Okay, you can do whatever you like, And they carry on in very, very vulnerable ways. But we can sing for God. Oh no, we don't want that. That's not acceptable. So we just have to look at what's the motive. And we see like you look at the Devatas and the demons, they're working in the same way. They're working in the same level. One's doing it for Krishna, one's doing it for themselves. And this is described as this verse, Prakriti Kriyamane Gune Kavi Hankaravi Munda Makata Hamati Manyate. The purport there, Prabhupada describes this in great detail, that if we're acting out of false ego, or we're absorbed in false ego, we think we're the doer of activities in this material world. But if we understand that it's Krishna's Prakriti that's actually manifesting everything in this material world, this is actually a position of Krishna consciousness. But if we think that I'm the doer, I'm the enjoyer, then we become bewildered, we become bound up by material nature. And this is, Krishna says this to Arjuna right at the end of the Gita. He said, if you follow my instructions, You'll cross over all the obstacles of conditioned life by my grace. You need to understand that. It's not by my power, not by my potency. He says, however, if you act out of false ego, not hearing me, you'll be lost. And then right at the end of the Gita, we see Arjuna says, what's that? Tvat prasada maya chuta. He says, by your mercy, I've understood. Karashe vachamtava, and I'll act according to your will, your words. So this is the position of the devotee, is we understand that by Krishna's mercy, not by my own capacity. And this is the problem, is like when we start to think like the Devatas do sometimes, that it's by my prowess, it's by my potency, by my opulence, then so many things are going on. This is the position of the greatest illusion. Because what's our capacity? We can't control anything, let alone the mind and senses. We're struggling constantly with the mind and senses. And it's only when we take shelter of Krishna that we can control the mind, the senses, or anything in this material world. So this is the position of a devotee, is we understand that everything we have is by the mercy of Krishna. Any capacity I have is by the mercy of Krishna. But out of his kindness, he allows me to take the credit. And this was Arjuna. He understood this at the end of the Gita. He said, by your mercy, tvat prasada maya chuta, that I am understanding and I will act according to your instruction. And Bali Maharaj is understanding this also. And Krishna, you go into the end of this chapter, read further on, and you'll see that Krishna is saying that. I gave him this opulence. Actually, no, Brahma says that. You gave him this opulence, and now you've taken it away from him. Brahma, he's a great devotee. He's understanding that by Krishna's mercy, I have opulence. By Krishna's mercy, I have power, I have capacity, I have anything. And Krishna can also, there's the Christian saying, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. So we also need to understand that anything we have is by Krishna's mercy. And sometimes he takes things, and there's two interesting verses I was reading this morning. One's 10 canto. And I just find it's two really interesting verses. Probably just read one. This is 1088.8. Sri Bhagavan Vacha Yasha. This is one of Prabhupada's favourite verses. Yasha Hamanugrinami Harishe Tadnaranshane Tato Dhanam Tajapnasya Svajana Dukha Dukhitam. The personality of God has said, if I especially favour someone, I gradually deprive him of his wealth. Then the relatives and friends of such a poverty-stricken man abandon him. In this way, he suffers one distress after another. That's Krishna's favour. You suffer one distress after another. Why? Why is it Krishna? How do we see that as Krishna's favour? Any thoughts?
We don't become comfortable here.
What did Kunti say? When I'm in distress, I think of you more. So for a devotee, when he's in distress, when a devotee is in distress, naturally the devotee thinks of Krishna. So sometimes it happens that Krishna takes away all our facilities because he sees, just like with Bali Maharaj, he could see, because Bali Maharaj is a great personality. He's the grandson of Prahlad. And gosh, that's, Prahlad's quite an extraordinary devotee. He's Prahlad's grandson. And the opulence of when he usurped Indra's throne, he was becoming bewildered by that. He was thinking he was powerful, he was thinking great. So Krishna took that away as a favor to him. And this is the point that he's saying here. You indirectly are more favorable. You'll see here in the verse, he says, Paraksha Paramo Guru. So Guru is meant in the sense here of benefactor or well-wisher, and Paraksha means indirect, and Parama means the greatest. Yeah? So indirectly, you're our greatest benefactor. Why? Because you're removing all these material opulences, you're destroying all these material facilities we have to put us in this position of helplessness. And we see in that position of helplessness, that's when we're the most inclined to call out for the mercy of Krishna. And Prabhupada would say the same when we're chanting our japa. We should have this position of helplessness. That my Lord, without your mercy, I cannot do anything. I cannot achieve anything. And so, everything we have, we need to understand every single thing we have, every capacity we have is simply down to the mercy of Krishna. And if we can take that position, then we'll progress really nicely in Krishna consciousness. Once Prabhupada was praying in front of the deity, during the class in the morning, he was telling the devotees that he could never fall down. And then later on that morning, he's praying in front of the deities. The devotee came up and asked Prabhupada, what were you praying for? Prabhupada said, I was praying to Krishna protect me so I never fall down. And then the devotee said, well, he said, well, Prabhupada, you said in the class that you can never fall down. He says, yes, because I'm always praying to Krishna that I can never fall down. If we become proud, very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. We may be very capable people, we may be great book teachers, we may be great temple presidents, great kirtaniers, whatever. But always understand that this is the mercy of Krishna. We have this potency by Krishna's grace, and like that, you can remove it. You can be the greatest kirtanier in the world, and in a moment you can be struck down with some disease. Gone. Never lead a kirtan again. You could be the great book distributor, and then so you become paralyzed. You lose your ability to speak. And we see this happens all the time. Devotees are struck down with debilitating diseases all the time. I just heard about one senior Vaishnav who's got dementia now. Very, very elevated soul, and now he's got dementia. Krishna's removing some last vestige of his karma before he goes back to Godhead, you could see. So, never become proud. Pride is such a dangerous thing. We should just see whatever I have, whatever capacity, that I can control my mind and senses. My Lord is so kind to me. He's so merciful of me. Okay. Thank you. Any questions, Will?
I'm too proud to ask questions.
Huh? I'm too proud to give a proper answer. And this is, like Prabhupada demonstrated all these qualities. He was such a humble Vaishnava, even though he was the great, universal Acharya, who was, so many. I mean, you look at what he did in ISKCON. He started with nothing. We can come to ISKCON, we can do so many different things, but look at what we've got. Look what Prabhupada's given us. Temples all around the world, beautiful deities, and wonderful books. Prabhupada started with nothing, yet he said it's all due to the mercy of my spiritual master. My spiritual master sent me so many beautiful flowers of the American nation to he never took credit for himself. He always gave credit to others, to his disciples, to his guru, to the Lord. And we need to take this same position. It's very hard, coming from this conditioned background where we're thinking we're the controller and the enjoyer and the doer. It's just something we need to actively cultivate.
I remember when now we are talking about pride, and Shyamananda Prabhu in Bangladesh was elaborating on this topic and was reminding us of the comparison between pride and a cancer. Because pride is something you cannot see. It's not that much tangible, like a cancer, and it can be noted later on, and sometimes too late, so that it cannot be.
That's often the case with cancers. They find out too late.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got 5th stage, blah blah blah, and you've got 2 months to live. Yeah. Like Tribhuvanatha, he got very short notice. He just felt a little bit dizzy one day in the bathroom. He went to the doctors. Oh, you've got such, cancer. It's a very, very advanced stage. You've got no hope. That's what it's like. Great devotees. And we can be struck down at any moment. But it's only by the mercy of Krishna that we can do anything. So we should always be try to cultivate this dependent position. Because only in that dependent position can we really make progress in spiritual life, can we really achieve anything in our spiritual life. Because that's what we are, we're dependent. We're nothing but that. You know, if we have any other concept, it's just artificial. Because we are completely dependent upon Krishna for everything, whether you like it or not. You know, even materialists, they're completely dependent. They can't do anything without God. Can't even breathe without Him. The heart doesn't beat. The super soul's there in the heart, making the heart function. It's all going on by the mercy of Krishna. And it's good to remind ourselves of this every single day. And that everything I have is by the mercy of Krishna. Yeah? You agree? So Prabhupada ki, Sarveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Jai Go Premanandi. Hare Krishna.